The moment I heard the slap, my knees almost gave out. And the worst part is, my daughter didn't even scream. She just apologized in a broken whisper that shattered something inside me. I stood there frozen behind that half-open door, my basket of empanadas growing cold in my trembling hands, and I knew in that instant that everything I had feared for the past 3 years was true. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. Before we begin, I'd be truly grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video and consider subscribing to the channel. It helps me keep sharing these stories with those who need them most. That morning in Queens felt different somehow. The January cold seeping through my worn wool coat as I walked the familiar 6 blocks from my apartment to hers. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, and my breath formed small clouds in the frigid air that dissipated almost as quickly as they appeared. I had woken up at 5:30 with an inexplicable urgency to see my daughter, to bring her something warm, something made with my own hands. The dream that woke me was already fading, but the feeling it left behind clung to my chest like a weight, pressing down on my ribs, making it hard to breathe normally. I had stood in my small kitchen watching the clock tick toward 6, unable to shake the sensation that something was wrong. The feeling wasn't new, if I'm being honest. It had been building for months, maybe years. A slow accumulation of unease that I kept trying to push away, to rationalize, to explain away as motherly worry. But that morning it demanded attention in a way I couldn't ignore. The empanadas were still hot when I wrapped them in aluminum foil, the kind she loved as a child, stuffed with beef and raisins the way my own mother taught me. I remembered my mother's hands, wrinkled and spotted with age, showing me how to seal the edges just right, how to crimp them so they wouldn't burst open during baking. Food made with love carries prayers in every bite, she used to say in Spanish, her voice rough from too many years of cigarettes and hard living. I wrapped those empanadas with the same care she had shown me, folding the foil in precise corners, tucking in the edges, trying to seal in not just heat, but hope, protection. All the things I wished I could give my daughter, but didn't know how. The streets were quiet at that hour, just the distant rumble of the subway beneath my feet, and the occasional car passing by with headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. I passed the bodega on the corner where Mr. Chen was already arranging produce outside. Plastic bins of apples and oranges that steamed slightly in the cold air. He nodded at me without speaking, and I nodded back. We had shared that silent morning greeting for 15 years now. 2 immigrants who understood that some connections needed no words. The streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, and I noticed things I normally rushed past. The way ice had formed in delicate patterns on a parked car's windshield, the graffiti someone had spray-painted over the weekend on the side of the corner store, the overflowing garbage can that rats had gotten into during the night. The city was waking up slowly around me, and I felt hyper-aware of every detail, as if my senses were sharpened by the anxiety thrumming through my veins. When I reached her brownstone apartment building on 34th Avenue, I noticed the lights were already on in her second-floor windows. That was unusual. My daughter had never been an early riser. As a teenager, I had to drag her out of bed for school, listening to her groan and complain about how unfair it was that classes started at 8 in the morning. Even after she became a mother herself, she often told me that she treasured those early morning hours when the baby was still sleeping, when she could finally rest. But there the lights were, glowing yellow against the dark facade of the building. Awake at 6 in the morning, my unease deepened. I climbed the stairs slowly, my arthritic knees protesting each step. The stairwell smelled of old cooking grease and the musty scent of water damage, familiar smells that usually comforted me with their ordinariness. But that morning they seemed oppressive, closing in around me. I counted the steps as I climbed. A habit from years ago when I used to count them with my daughter, turning the mundane act of climbing stairs into a game. 1, 2, 3, 4. 23 steps total to the second floor. I knew because we had counted them together hundreds of times. I reached her floor and paused in the hallway, catching my breath. The basket felt heavier than it should have, or maybe my arms were just tired. I had been having trouble sleeping lately, lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations with my daughter, analyzing her words for hidden meanings, searching for clues I might have missed. I knocked softly so I wouldn't wake the baby. The sound seemed too loud in the quiet hallway, and I winced. No answer came. I knocked again, a little louder this time. And that's when I noticed the door wasn't fully latched. It stood open just an inch, enough to let a sliver of yellow light escape into the dim hallway. My hand hovered in the air, uncertain. Should I knock again? Call out? The gap in the doorway seemed to pulse with possibility, with danger, with invitation. I could hear sounds from inside now that I was paying attention. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant gurgle of pipes, the creak of floorboards as someone moved around. I should have called out. I should have announced myself. But something held me back, some instinct I didn't yet understand. It was the same instinct that had woken me at 5:30, the same feeling that had driven me out into the cold darkness with my basket of empanadas. My body knew something my mind hadn't yet accepted. I pushed the door open just enough to peer inside, moving with a silence I didn't know I possessed. The hinges made no sound. The hallway inside was dim, lit only by the light spilling from the kitchen at the end. I could see my daughter's coat hanging on the hook by the door, her shoes lined up neatly beneath it. The apartment smelled like coffee and something else, something acrid and sharp that I couldn't quite identify. Fear, maybe. Can fear have a smell? And that's when I heard his voice, sharp and cold as the winter air outside. "This coffee's cold. Do you do anything right?" My breath caught in my throat. The words hit me like a physical blow, each syllable loaded with contempt. I could see into the kitchen from where I stood, could see my daughter's back as she stood by the counter, could see how her shoulders hunched in a way that made her look so small, so defeated, so unlike the confident woman I had raised her to be. She was wearing the pale blue robe I had given her last Christmas, the one I had saved up for 3 months to afford. It was soft fleece with embroidered flowers on the collar, and when I had given it to her, she had hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, had told me it was beautiful, that she loved it. Now it hung on her frame like it was 2 sizes too big, and I realized with a shock that she had lost weight. How had I not noticed before? Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and even from behind I could see the tension in her neck, the way she held herself like someone expecting a blow. I watched her reach for the coffee pot with shaking hands. Her fingers, those fingers that used to paint watercolors and play piano and braid flowers into chains during summer picnics, were trembling so badly I was afraid she would drop the pot. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I made it 20 minutes ago. I thought you'd be up by now. Let me heat it up for you." The apology in her voice, the desperate, placating tone, the way she was already assuming blame for something that wasn't her fault, it all made me want to scream. This was not how I had raised her. I had taught her to stand up for herself, to demand respect, to never let anyone make her feel small. Where had that girl gone? Where was the daughter who had once told off a teacher who tried to blame her for another student's mistake? Where was the young woman who had argued with her college advisor for an hour to get into an overbooked class she wanted to take? "I don't want it heated up," he snapped, and I could hear him moving closer to her. "I want it fresh. Is that too much to ask?" And then it happened. That sound. Sharp and unmistakable, a crack that seemed to split the air itself. A slap. The sound reverberated through my entire body, through my bones, through my heart. Time seemed to slow down and speed up simultaneously. I gripped the doorframe to keep from falling, my vision swimming, black spots dancing at the edges of my sight. Through the gap, I saw her stumble sideways, her hand flying to her cheek. The coffee pot clattered against the counter but didn't fall. Somehow, even in that moment, even as she was being struck, she managed to catch it, to prevent it from breaking, to keep from making a mess that would anger him further. "Please," she begged, and the brokenness in that single word carved something out of my chest. My heart felt like it was being scooped out with a dull spoon, leaving a raw, bleeding cavity behind. "Please, it was supposed to be hot. Just give me a second. Please." The begging. The desperate, terrified begging. My daughter was begging a man who had just struck her for the crime of coffee that wasn't hot enough. I thought I might vomit right there in the hallway. He said nothing. I could hear his heavy breathing, could sense the rage radiating from him, even though I couldn't see his face from this angle. The breathing was controlled, deliberate, like he was savoring his power over her, like he enjoyed her fear. My daughter stood there frozen, one hand still pressed to her reddening cheek, the other clutching the edge of the counter as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. I could see the mark blooming on her face even from where I stood, a red handprint that would turn purple by afternoon. I had seen bruises like that before, back when I was young and my own father would come home drunk and angry. I knew exactly how that mark would evolve over the next few days. The colors it would pass through, red to purple to green to yellow. I knew how it would ache, how she would wince when she touched it, how she would have to practice in the mirror to find the right angle to apply makeup to hide it. In that moment, standing in that shadowed hallway with my useless basket of empanadas, every memory of her childhood rose up to meet me. I saw her at 6 years old, gap-toothed and laughing as she showed me her first loose tooth, wiggling it with her tongue, asking me when the tooth fairy would come, and whether the tooth fairy accepted trade requests because she wanted a puppy instead of money. I saw her at 12, crying in my arms after her father left us, asking me why he didn't love us enough to stay, asking me what she had done wrong to make him leave, and me trying to explain that his leaving had nothing to do with her worth and everything to do with his weakness. I saw her at 17, radiant in her graduation gown, clutching her acceptance letter to Hunter College, her eyes shining with tears of joy, telling me that she was going to make me proud, that she was going to be someone, that she was going to make all my sacrifices worth it. I smelled her coconut shampoo, the same brand she had used since high school, the scent that always meant safety and home and my baby girl. I felt the weight of her head on my shoulder during all those nights when it was just the two of us against the world, when we would curl up on the couch together watching movies we couldn't really afford to rent, sharing a bowl of popcorn and pretending we weren't worried about the bills piling up on the kitchen table. I heard her laughter, the real laughter that used to fill our small apartment, the kind that made her snort in a way that embarrassed her but delighted me because it was so genuine, so unguarded. And now this. Now my beautiful, brilliant daughter was standing in her own kitchen, apologizing for the temperature of coffee, her cheek bearing the mark of a man who claimed to love her. The contrast between those memories and this reality was so jarring it felt like whiplash, like my brain couldn't reconcile the two images, the girl who was and the woman who is. The expectation had been so different. When she told me she was getting married 4 years ago, I had wept with joy. I remember that day so clearly. She had come to my apartment on a Sunday afternoon in March, and the moment she walked through the door, I knew something big had happened. She had that glow about her, that excitement that seemed to radiate from her skin. She had barely sat down before the words came tumbling out. "Mom," he proposed, "I'm getting married." I had imagined grandchildren and Sunday dinners and a daughter finally secure in the arms of someone who would treasure her. I had imagined her happy, safe, loved in the way she deserved to be loved. I had imagined a son-in-law who would be a partner to her, who would share the burdens of life with her, who would see her value and protect it fiercely. The reality was this: a woman I barely recognized, whispering apologies for crimes as small as lukewarm coffee, wearing bruises under her makeup, flinching at shadows. I backed away from the door silently, my heart hammering so hard I was certain they would hear it. The pounding seemed to echo in my ears, so loud it drowned out everything else. My hands were still shaking, and I pressed them against my coat to try to still them. I made it to the stairwell before my legs gave out, and I sat there on the cold concrete steps, pressing my fist against my mouth to muffle the sobs that threatened to tear out of me. The cold from the concrete seeped through my coat and into my bones, but I barely felt it. I was too numb with shock, too flooded with horror and rage and helplessness. The empanadas lay forgotten beside me, the foil package now cooling. All that care and love I had folded into them rendered meaningless. I thought about how many times I had brought her food, how many times I had stood outside this door with offerings and hope, never knowing what was really happening inside. How many times had I knocked on this door while she was hiding a bruise? How many times had I sat in that kitchen drinking tea while he belittled her in ways I didn't hear? How many times had I failed to see what was right in front of me? The guilt threatened to swallow me whole. I should have known. I should have seen. What kind of mother doesn't see that her daughter is being abused? I sat there on those steps for 20 minutes, maybe longer. I lost track of time. Other residents of the building passed by me, some glancing at me with concern, others ignoring me entirely. A young man in a business suit asked if I was okay. I nodded and told him I was fine, just resting. He looked uncertain but moved on. An elderly woman with a small dog paused and studied me with knowing eyes, but said nothing, just reached out and briefly squeezed my shoulder before continuing down the stairs. Eventually, I forced myself to stand. My knees ached from sitting on the cold concrete, and I had to grip the railing to pull myself up. I picked up the basket of empanadas, now completely cold, and slowly made my way down the stairs and out into the street. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. It seemed obscene somehow, that the world could be so beautiful while my daughter was suffering. People were beginning to emerge from their homes, heading to work, to school, to their normal lives. I watched a young mother pushing a stroller, singing softly to the baby inside. I watched two teenage boys laughing and shoving each other as they walked to the subway. I watched life continuing as if nothing had changed, as if my entire world hadn't just cracked open. I walked home in a daze, not really seeing the streets I passed through. When I reached my apartment building, I stood outside for a long moment, unable to make myself go in. The thought of going back to my empty apartment, of sitting alone with what I had just witnessed, felt unbearable. But eventually, I did go in. I climbed the stairs to my third-floor apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The apartment was exactly as I had left it an hour earlier. The breakfast dishes still in the sink, the coffee pot still half full, the morning newspaper still folded on the table. Everything was the same, but everything had changed. I set the basket of empanadas on the counter and stared at them. All that effort, all that love, and for what? They couldn't protect her. They couldn't save her. They were just food, just flour and meat and raisins, powerless against the monster my daughter had married. I raised her alone from the time she was 9 years old. Her father, may he answer for his sins someday, walked out on us without warning, leaving nothing but a note on the kitchen table and $300 that was gone within a week. The note was brief, almost cruelly so. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. 7 words to end a 13-year marriage. 7 words to abandon a daughter who adored him. 7 words to destroy the life we had built together. I was 32 years old with a 4th-grade education and a daughter who still believed in fairy tales. I remember standing in that kitchen reading that note over and over, as if reading it enough times would make it say something different, would reveal some hidden message that made sense of the senseless. My daughter was at school. I had 4 hours before she came home, 4 hours to figure out how to tell her that her father was gone, 4 hours to transform from a woman who had relied on her husband for everything into a woman who could handle the world alone. So I did what I had to do. I cleaned offices in Manhattan, Taking the train in at midnight and working until dawn, scrubbing toilets and mopping floors in buildings where the executives would arrive hours later without ever seeing the hands that made their workspaces shine. I would ride the subway home as the sun came up, surrounded by other tired people heading in the opposite direction, all of us part of the invisible workforce that kept the city running. During the day, I sewed alterations in a tiny shop in Astoria, my fingers cramping over hems and seams until they bled. I can still remember the smell of that shop, fabric and steam and the Chinese food from the restaurant next door. Mrs. Kim, who owned the shop, was kind but firm, expecting perfection in every stitch. I learned quickly, driven by the fear of losing the job, of not being able to pay rent, of ending up on the street with my daughter. And 3 evenings a week I cared for an elderly couple in Forest Hills, cooking their dinners and helping them bathe, listening to their stories about the old country while I folded their laundry and wondered if I would ever sleep again. Mr. and Mrs. Goldstein had fled Poland during the war, had lost everyone except each other, had rebuilt their lives from nothing. Mrs. Goldstein would hold my hand sometimes while I helped her into bed and tell me, "You're stronger than you know. We survive because we have no choice. And then one day we realize we're not just surviving anymore, we're living." There were nights when I bought my daughter books instead of dinner, when I told her I had already eaten just so she could have the last piece of chicken. There were times when I wore shoes with holes in them so she could have a new pair for school. There were birthdays when her presents came from thrift stores, and I stayed up all night wrapping them beautifully so she wouldn't feel the poverty we lived in. I forgave every mistake she made growing up, even the ones that cut deep, like when she was 15 and stole $40 from my purse to buy concert tickets. I found out when I went to pay for groceries and my wallet was empty. We had eaten nothing but rice and beans for the rest of that week. When I confronted her about it, she lied at first, said she didn't know what I was talking about. But eventually the truth came out, along with tears and apologies and promises to never do it again. Or when she was 18 and stayed out all night without calling, leaving me pacing the floor until sunrise, imagining her dead in a ditch somewhere. I called hospitals, I called the police, I called every friend of hers I could think of. She finally came home at 7 in the morning, smelling of alcohol and cigarettes, and was angry that I was upset. "You don't own me," she had shouted. "I'm an adult now. I can do what I want." I forgave it all because I understood that she was just a child trying to navigate a world that had taken her father from her, trying to find her footing in a life that offered no guarantees. I understood because I was trying to navigate that same world, trying to find my own footing, trying to believe that we would both be okay eventually. I remembered the day she met him 5 years ago now. She had come to my apartment glowing, practically floating across the floor as she told me about this wonderful man she had met at a friend's birthday party. Her eyes were bright, her cheeks flushed, and she talked so fast I could barely keep up. He was a financial analyst at a firm in Brooklyn, she said. He was charming and successful, and he made her feel like she was the only woman in the world. She showed me his picture on her phone. A handsome man with dark hair and an easy smile, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. He looked polished, sophisticated, everything I had never been able to give her. He represented a life she had dreamed of, a life I had wanted her to have. "Mom," she had said, gripping my hands across the kitchen table, her fingers warm and slightly trembling with excitement. "I think he's the love of my life." And I had smiled and hugged her and told her I was happy for her, even though something in that photograph had made my stomach tighten. Something about his eyes, the way they didn't quite match his smile. They were cold eyes, calculating, the kind of eyes that assessed value and found it wanting. But I pushed the feeling away. I told myself I was being paranoid, overprotective, unable to let go. I told myself that every mother feels this way when her daughter finds someone, that it was natural to worry, but wrong to interfere. I convinced myself that my unease was about losing her, not about him being dangerous. I was wrong. The first time I met him in person was 2 weeks later. He brought flowers, expensive roses that must have cost a fortune, the kind I had only ever seen in fancy flower shops on the Upper East Side. He shook my hand firmly and called me ma'am and complimented my apartment, though I saw the way his eyes swept over my threadbare furniture and the water stains on the ceiling, the way his smile tightened just slightly when he noticed the cracks in the plaster walls. Over dinner, which I had spent 2 days preparing, he talked about his work, about stocks and investments, and something called Bitcoin that I didn't understand. He mentioned casually that he had made what he called a comfortable sum in the stock market, that he was building wealth for their future. The way he talked about money made it clear that he viewed it as a measure of worth, that he divided the world into those who had and those who didn't, and that he was firmly on the side of those who had. "Your daughter is lucky," he said, cutting into his chicken with precise movements, the knife making sharp clicks against the plate. "She'll never have to work the way you did. I'll make sure of that." It should have sounded kind. It should have sounded like a promise. But the way he said it made me feel small, made me feel like my years of backbreaking labor were something shameful, something to be pitied and left behind. Made me feel like I was something to be saved from, rather than someone who had done what needed to be done. My daughter glowed beside him, and I kept my doubts to myself. I smiled and thanked him for taking care of her. I played the role of the grateful mother, relieved that her daughter had found someone who could provide the security I never could. And with every word, I buried my instincts deeper, ignored the warning signals my body was sending, chose hope over wisdom. I would spend the next 3 years regretting that choice. The comments started small, little observations that seemed harmless at first but accumulated like drops of poison in a glass of water. At their engagement party, held at an expensive restaurant in Manhattan that I could never have afforded, he introduced her to his colleagues and said, "She's so lucky her mom helps out. My family never had handouts. We learned to stand on our own 2 feet." The words were delivered with a smile, but I saw my daughter's face fall just slightly, saw the hurt flash across her features before she covered it with a laugh. Another time, when she brought him to my apartment for Sunday dinner, he watched me cooking and said to her, "They don't teach cooking anymore, huh? I guess that's what takeout is for." She laughed it off, but I noticed she didn't eat much that night, noticed the way she pushed food around her plate and avoided meeting my eyes. After they married and moved into the apartment in Queens, the changes came gradually. She started canceling our weekly lunches, always with apologetic texts saying he needed her for something. He was working from home and she had to be quiet. He had clients coming over, and the place had to be perfect. The texts became shorter, more formulaic. "Sorry, can't make it. Next week for sure." But next week never came. She stopped wearing the bright colors she loved, started dressing in grays and blacks and navy blues. The vibrant scarves and bold jewelry disappeared from her wardrobe. She looked like she was trying to disappear, to take up as little space as possible. Her voice on the phone grew softer, more hesitant, as if she were always listening for something in the background. Conversations that used to flow freely became stilted, careful. She would pause mid-sentence, and I could hear her listening, making sure she was alone before continuing. And she always defended him. "Mom, he's just stressed. Work is really demanding right now." "Mom, he grew up differently than we did. He has high standards." "Mom, I need to be better at managing the house. He's right. I do let things slip." Each defense was a dagger to my heart. Each excuse she made for him was evidence that he had gotten into her head, had convinced her that his behavior was her fault, that if she could just be better, do better, be perfect, then everything would be fine. I began to wonder if I had sacrificed everything, all those years of exhaustion and loneliness and pain, only to watch her be slowly torn apart by someone who claimed to love her. The question kept me awake at night, staring at the ceiling of my small bedroom, listening to the sounds of the city outside my window, and wondering where I had gone wrong. Had I not taught her what love should look like? Had I not shown her through my own strength that she didn't need a man to complete her? Had I failed her in some fundamental way? My 65th birthday passed with only a text message from her, sent at 11 o'clock at night. "Sorry, Mom. Crazy day. We'll call you tomorrow." She didn't call the next day, or the day after that. When we finally spoke a week later, she sounded distant, distracted. And when I asked if everything was okay, she said, "Of course everything was fine. Why would I think otherwise?" But I knew everything wasn't fine. I knew it in my bones, in my gut, in every maternal instinct I possessed. I just didn't know how to reach her, how to break through the wall that had been built around her. Last year, when I was hospitalized for vertigo so severe I couldn't stand without vomiting, when the room spun so violently I thought I was dying, she visited once in the 3 days I was there. She stayed for 20 minutes, checking her phone constantly, her leg bouncing with anxiety. When I asked where her husband was, she said he didn't want her taking the subway alone at night. It was 2 in the afternoon. The sun was shining through the hospital window, but she said it without irony, without seeming to recognize the absurdity of the statement. I wanted to scream at her to wake up, to see what was happening to her. But I was too weak, too dizzy, too afraid that if I said anything she would leave and not come back. My grandson's preschool graduation happened on a Tuesday in May. I found out about it when I ran into her neighbor Mrs. Patterson at the grocery store, who mentioned how sweet the ceremony had been, how my grandson had sung a little song about butterflies and everyone had clapped. When I called my daughter that night, hurt and confused, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice, she said, "Oh God, Mom, I'm so sorry. We forgot to tell you. It was such a hectic week." But I had reminded her about it the week before. I had asked her when it was, so I could request the day off from my current job at a nursing home in Flushing. She had said she would check and get back to me. She never did. The realization that she had deliberately not told me about the graduation, that he had probably forbidden her from inviting me, hit me like a truck. I sat there with the phone in my hand, listening to her make excuses, and knew with absolute certainty that I was being cut out of her life, that he was isolating her, systematically removing the people who might see what he was doing, who might encourage her to leave. The microaggressions, the neglect, the slow erosion of our relationship. It all felt like watching her disappear into fog, reaching out and finding nothing but empty air where my daughter used to be. Every conversation felt like trying to grab smoke, like she was already gone and I was just talking to a ghost. Then came the day 3 months ago that changed everything. She showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Sunday afternoon, wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast, even though the sky was thick with clouds that promised rain. She said she was just in the neighborhood, thought she would stop by. But she lived 30 minutes away. She was never just in the neighborhood. We sat at my kitchen table drinking tea, and she kept the sunglasses on. I asked her to take them off. She said the light was bothering her eyes. I reached across and gently removed them myself, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The bruise covered half her left cheek, a mottled purple and yellow that makeup had tried and failed to conceal. It was the kind of bruise that came from a hard blow, the kind that radiated pain even just looking at it. My hands started shaking so badly I had to set down my teacup before I dropped it. "What happened?" I asked, my voice coming out strange and high, barely controlled. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She looked down at her tea, at the table, at her hands, anywhere but at me. "The baby," she said quickly, the words rehearsed, practiced. "He was playing rough and accidentally hit me with his toy truck. You know how toddlers are." But I knew toddlers. I had raised one. And toddlers didn't leave bruises in the shape of fingers, didn't leave marks that wrapped from cheekbone to jaw as if someone had gripped her face and squeezed. Toddlers didn't create injuries that required this much concealer, this much lying, this much shame radiating from every inch of her body. I stood up to make more tea because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. didn't know how to arrange my face to hide the horror and rage that were rising in my throat. My hands were shaking as I reached for the kettle, as I turned on the tap. The water ran and ran while I stood there frozen, watching it overflow the kettle, spilling into the sink. I reached for a cup in the cabinet, and my fingers slipped. The porcelain shattered across the linoleum floor, pieces scattering everywhere, the sound of breaking seeming to echo forever in the small kitchen. I stood there staring at the fragments, at the way something whole could become so irreparably broken in an instant, and felt like I was looking at a metaphor for my daughter's life. My daughter jumped up to help me clean it, and we knelt on the floor together, picking up pieces in silence. Our hands worked in tandem, gathering the sharp fragments, and it reminded me of when she was small, and we used to do puzzles together on rainy afternoons. But this was a puzzle that couldn't be put back together. I wanted to scream at her, shake her, demand the truth. But I was afraid that if I pushed too hard she would leave and never come back. Afraid that naming the thing we both knew was true would somehow make it more real, more dangerous. Afraid that I would say the wrong thing and drive her further into his arms, further away from safety. That night I stood in front of my bathroom mirror for a long time, looking at my own face, at the lines and gray hairs and tired eyes of a woman who had survived so much. I had survived my husband leaving. I had survived poverty. I had survived exhaustion so complete that I sometimes couldn't remember my own name. I had survived every obstacle life had thrown at me, but I didn't know how to survive this. I didn't know how to save my daughter from a danger she refused to acknowledge. I whispered to my reflection, "Say something. Do something." But the words felt hollow because I didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do that wouldn't drive her further away. The woman in the mirror stared back at me with hollow eyes, and I saw in her face my own helplessness, my own failure. The fear of losing her completely, of pushing her into a corner where she had to choose between me and him, closed around my throat like a fist. So I said nothing. I helped her clean up the broken cup, made her a sandwich she barely touched, and watched her leave with her sunglasses back in place, hiding the truth we both refused to speak. That week, I took all her childhood photos down from my walls. I couldn't bear to look at them anymore. Couldn't stand the contrast between the laughing, confident girl in those pictures and the scared, diminished woman who had sat at my table lying about bruises. The weight of each frame in my hands felt like I was burying her, like I was accepting that the daughter I knew was gone. I packed the photos into a box and shoved it under my bed, and for 3 days I cried every time I walked past the empty spaces on my walls. The walls looked wounded, the clean rectangles where the pictures had hung standing out against the yellowed paint, accusations in the form of absence. When I finally worked up the courage to call her and gently, carefully, ask about the bruise again, choosing my words with the precision of someone defusing a bomb, she reacted in a way that terrified me more than anything else had. She panicked. Her voice went high and fast and desperate, words tumbling over each other in a rush to explain, to defend, to make me stop asking questions. "Mom, please don't ruin this for me, please. He's under so much pressure at work right now. The stock market has been volatile and he's managing some major accounts and he snaps sometimes when I mess things up. But it's my fault. I'm not good at keeping the house the way he needs it. I forget things. I'm not organized enough. If I could just be better at this, if I could just get it right, he wouldn't get so frustrated." Every word felt like she was slapping me instead of him slapping her. Every excuse was evidence of how deeply he had gotten into her mind, how thoroughly he had convinced her that she was the problem. I tried to tell her that nothing she could do or fail to do justified violence. That love didn't look like this, that she deserved better, that she was not responsible for his actions. But she cut me off, her voice rising to a pitch I had never heard from her before. "You don't understand. You never liked him anyway. You're always judging him, always looking for problems. This is my marriage, Mom. Stay out of it." And then she hung up on me. My own daughter hung up on me. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, harsh and final, and I sat there with the dead phone in my hand and felt something inside me crack wide open. I sat there with the dead phone in my hand and felt something inside me crack wide open. Not a clean break, but a jagged fracture that splintered in multiple directions, spreading like cracks in ice. The next Sunday, they invited me for dinner at their place. The invitation came via text, formal and stiff. Dinner this Sunday at 6. Please come. No warmth, no explanation for the argument we'd had, no acknowledgement of the fact that she had hung up on me. Just a command dressed up as an invitation. I almost didn't go, but I was desperate to see her, to somehow fix whatever had broken between us, to find a way back to my daughter. I spent hours trying to decide what to bring, what to wear, how to act. Should I pretend the argument never happened? Should I apologize for upsetting her? Should I confront the situation head-on? In the end, I brought a simple pie, apple with cinnamon, her childhood favorite. I wore my best dress, the navy blue one I saved for special occasions. And I decided to follow her lead, to be whatever she needed me to be if it meant staying in her life. When I arrived, he answered the door with a broad smile, as charming as the day I met him. It was like watching an actor step onto a stage, the transformation so complete and so instant that it was almost impressive in its calculation. Come in, he said warmly, taking my coat with exaggerated care. We've missed you. It's been too long. It had been 1 week. 1 week since my daughter had hung up on me, but he acted as if we were old friends reuniting after a long absence. My daughter was in the kitchen, and when I hugged her, she felt stiff, uncomfortable, like hugging a mannequin. The bruise had faded, but I could still see a shadow of it under her makeup, a yellowish tint along her jawline that foundation couldn't quite cover. My grandson, nearly 3 years old now, hugged my legs and I picked him up, breathing in his little boy smell of graham crackers and baby shampoo, trying to anchor myself in his innocence, in the pure love of a child who didn't yet understand the darkness surrounding him. During dinner, her husband was the perfect host. He asked about my health, my work, made jokes that seemed designed to make everyone laugh. He complimented the pie I had brought, insisted on serving everyone himself, poured wine with a flourish. He was performing, I realized, putting on a show of the loving family man. And my daughter sat beside him playing her role too, smiling at the right moments, laughing at his jokes, serving food with practiced efficiency. But I noticed things. The way she flinched slightly when he reached for the salt, her body tensing for just a fraction of a second before she controlled the reaction. The way she watched him constantly out of the corner of her eye, monitoring his mood, reading his face for signs of displeasure. The way she jumped up to refill his water glass before he could even ask, anticipating his needs with the hypervigilance of someone who had learned that failing to anticipate came with consequences. At one point, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me with that smile that never reached his eyes. She gets a little dramatic when she's tired, he said, as if we were discussing the weather, as if my daughter weren't sitting right there. Emotional. You know how women can be. My daughter stared at her plate and said nothing. Her face was carefully blank, wiped clean of reaction. It was the face of someone who had learned not to exist too loudly. Later, as I was getting ready to leave, as I was wrapping my scarf around my neck and reaching for my coat, my grandson tugged on my sleeve and whispered, "Daddy yells a lot." The words hit me like a physical blow. I knelt down to his level, trying to keep my face calm even though my heart was racing. "Does Daddy scare you, sweetheart?" He nodded, his little face serious in the way children get when they're speaking a truth adults don't want to hear. "He makes Mommy cry." Before I could respond, before I could ask anything else, his father appeared in the doorway. "Time for bed, buddy," he said, his voice perfectly pleasant, as if he hadn't heard what his son just said, though I was certain he had. He scooped up my grandson and carried him away, and I was left standing there with my coat half on, shaking with rage and helplessness. A few days after that dinner, I ran into Mrs. Patterson in the lobby of my building. She was my neighbor 2 floors down, a retired teacher who had lived in the building for 40 years. We had been friendly for a long time, often chatting in the elevator or the laundry room, sharing small details of our lives in the way neighbors do. "I've been meaning to talk to you," she said, her weathered face concerned. She glanced around the empty lobby and lowered her voice. "About your daughter." My heart started pounding. "What about her?" She glanced around to make sure we were alone, then lowered her voice even further. "I have a friend who lives in the building next to theirs. Same floor, walls are thin. She hears shouting through the walls. A lot of shouting, and crying. She's called the police twice, but by the time they arrive, everything is quiet, and your daughter says everything is fine." I felt my knees go weak. The lobby seemed to tilt around me, and I had to reach for the wall to steady myself. Mrs. Patterson gripped my arm to keep me from falling, her old hands surprisingly strong. "Your daughter is drowning," she said quietly, and there was something in her eyes that told me she knew what she was talking about, that she had seen this before, maybe lived it herself. "Don't let her go under." Those words echoed in my mind for weeks. Don't let her go under. But how could I save someone who refused to admit they were drowning? How could I reach someone who kept insisting they were fine even as the water closed over their head? How could I throw a lifeline to someone who wouldn't grab it? I spent nights lying awake, running through scenarios in my head. I could call the police myself, but without my daughter's cooperation, what could they do? I could call child services, but my grandson wasn't being physically harmed, and would they remove him based on yelling alone? I could try to get her alone, to really talk to her without him there. But he never let her out of his sight. Every solution I imagined hit a wall, and I felt trapped, helpless, watching disaster unfold in slow motion. The answer came on that January morning, standing behind the door with my basket of empanadas, hearing the slap, hearing my daughter's broken apology. Sometimes clarity comes not from careful planning, but from witnessing something so undeniable that it burns away all the doubt and fear and hesitation. Something ancient and fierce woke inside me in that moment. The woman who had once worked 18-hour shifts to keep her child fed. The woman who had stood up to landlords and bill collectors and men who thought they could take advantage of a single mother. The woman who had looked exhaustion and poverty and loneliness in the face and refused to surrender. The woman who had raised a daughter alone and survived every impossible thing the world threw at her. That woman stepped fully into the apartment. The door swung open under my hand, and I walked in with my back straight and my head high. My footsteps were loud on the hardwood floor, announcing my presence, shattering the terrible intimacy of their moment. My daughter gasped, her hand still pressed to her reddening cheek. He spun around, his face going from rage to shock in an instant, his mouth opening in surprise. For just a second, I saw him off balance, caught, exposed. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. My voice came out steady and cold and clear, colder than I knew I was capable of. I heard everything. The silence that followed felt like it lasted for hours, though it was probably only seconds. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed by on the street outside. My heart beat so loud I could hear it in my ears. He recovered quickly, that charming smile sliding back into place like a mask. I watched the transformation, watched him reach for his performance. "Oh, this isn't what it looks like. We were just having a disagreement about the coffee. You know how couples are, sometimes things get heated. It's nothing serious. We were actually just about to make up, weren't we, honey?" He looked at my daughter expectantly, waiting for her to back up his story, to play her part in the lie. I looked at my daughter. She was staring at me with wide eyes, terrified, and I couldn't tell if she was afraid of him or afraid of me destroying the illusion she had worked so hard to maintain. Maybe both. Probably both. "I heard everything," I repeated, letting each word fall like a stone into still water. I heard you yell at her. I heard you hit her. I heard her beg." He opened his mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. The gesture surprised even me. The authority in it, the finality. "I'm leaving now," I said. "But this isn't over." For the first time in years, I felt my spine straighten. I felt the weight I had been carrying, the weight of fear and doubt and helpless worry, begin to shift. Something had changed in that moment, something fundamental and irreversible. I was done being silent. I was done being complicit. I was done watching my daughter disappear. I was done pretending that staying quiet was protecting anyone. I set the basket of empanadas on the counter and walked out, my steps steady, my head high. Behind me, I heard him start to say something, then stop. The silence I left in my wake felt powerful, felt like a declaration of war. That night, I barely slept, but when I did finally drift off around 4 a.m, I slept deeper and more peacefully than I had in years. Because for the first time in a long time, I had taken action. I had spoken truth. I had stopped pretending. Even if I didn't know what came next, even if I had no plan, I had finally stopped being paralyzed by fear. The next morning, I went to the community center in Astoria and asked to speak with someone about domestic violence. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions, didn't make me explain. She just nodded and said, "Let me get Maria for you." They connected me with a social worker named Maria, a woman about my daughter's age with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She didn't judge. She didn't tell me what I should have done differently. She didn't shame me for not seeing the signs sooner or for not acting sooner. She just listened, and then she helped me understand the steps I could take, the resources that were available, the ways I could support my daughter without pushing her away. We talked about safety planning, about documentation, about the fact that the most dangerous time for a victim of domestic violence is when they try to leave. "That's when they feel most threatened," Maria explained. "That's when they lose control. And for someone like him, someone who needs control, that's when he's most dangerous." We talked about the cycle of abuse, about trauma bonding, about why it's so hard for people to leave even when the situation is clearly dangerous. She explained things that helped me understand my daughter's behavior, helped me see that her staying wasn't weakness or stupidity, but the result of systematic psychological manipulation. She gave me phone numbers for hotlines, for shelters, for lawyers who work with domestic violence cases. She gave me pamphlets and brochures and a folder to keep everything organized. "The most important thing," Maria told me, leaning forward with her hands clasped on her desk, "is to let her know you're there, that you believe her, that you won't abandon her no matter what she decides, because he's probably been telling her that no one will believe her, that everyone will think she's crazy, that if she leaves, she'll lose everything. Your job is to be the voice that contradicts his, to be the constant reminder that there's a way out, even when she can't see it herself." I went home with a folder full of information and a plan. That night I slept 8 full hours for the first time in a decade. 1 week after the incident with the coffee, they invited me over for what he called a family talk. The invitation was formal, almost corporate in its tone. "We'd like to have a family meeting to clear the air," the text message said. I knew it was a setup, knew he wanted to smooth things over, to convince me that what I had seen wasn't real, to bring me back into line. But I went anyway, because I needed my daughter to see that I wasn't going to be intimidated, that I wasn't going to disappear. When I arrived, he greeted me at the door like nothing had happened, all smiles and warmth. The apartment was immaculate, flowers on the table, fresh coffee brewing. The scene was so carefully staged it felt like walking onto a movie set. My daughter sat on the couch looking exhausted, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes red-rimmed as if she had been crying recently. He sat down across from me and leaned forward, his expression earnest, his voice modulated to sound reasonable and concerned. "I'm so glad you came. I think there's been a misunderstanding and I wanted to clear the air. We've all been on edge lately. Work has been incredibly stressful. I've been managing some high-stakes investments, some significant money in various stocks, and even some cryptocurrency portfolios, and I'm afraid I've been bringing that stress home. What you heard the other morning, that was completely out of character for me. I would never hurt your daughter. You have to know that. You misunderstood what was happening. He was good. I had to give him that. His tone was reasonable, his words carefully chosen. He was making me out to be the hysterical one, the one who jumped to conclusions, the paranoid mother-in-law who saw problems where there were none. My daughter sat there staring at the floor, saying nothing. She was disappearing into herself, becoming smaller and quieter, trying not to exist. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder Maria had helped me prepare. I opened it on the coffee table between us, spreading out the contents with deliberate care. Inside were printed screenshots of text messages my daughter had sent me over the past year, messages I had saved without really knowing why. Messages that said things like, "I'm sorry I can't make it tonight. Something came up," and "Please don't be mad at him, he's just stressed," and "I shouldn't have said anything, forget I mentioned it." Also in the folder was a timeline I had created, documenting every canceled plan, every unexplained bruise my daughter had tried to hide, every time I had noticed her flinching or going quiet or making excuses. It was all there in black and white, a pattern so clear it couldn't be denied. "I didn't misunderstand anything," I said. My voice was steady and calm, and I felt a power in that calmness that I had never experienced before. It was the power of someone who had stopped caring what he thought of her, stopped trying to be liked or accepted, stopped playing the game. I know what I heard, and I know this isn't the first time. I have been watching my daughter disappear for 3 years. I have been watching her make herself smaller and quieter and more apologetic. I have been watching the light go out of her eyes, and I'm done pretending I don't see it. His face changed then. The mask of charm slipped and I saw the rage underneath, cold and controlled, far more frightening than if he had yelled. "You think you can break up our family?" he said, his voice low and dangerous, each word carefully enunciated. "You think you can come in here with your little folder and your accusations and turn her against me? She's my wife. This is our home. You're a lonely old woman who can't accept that her daughter has her own life now. You're jealous. You can't stand that she's happy, that she has what you never had." The words were designed to hurt, to make me doubt myself, to make me feel small. But they bounced off me. I had stopped being afraid of him. I looked at him steadily, meeting his eyes without flinching. "I will not let my daughter be humiliated or harmed," I said. "I will not accept lies. I will not stay silent while you hurt her." Then I turned to my daughter, who was still staring at the floor, tears running down her face, her hands gripping her knees so hard her knuckles were white. "And I will no longer buy love," I told her, speaking to her, but meaning it for me too. "I will no longer accept crumbs of affection and pretend they're enough. I love you more than anything in this world, but I will not watch you be destroyed. Respect us or lose us." My daughter's chin trembled. She looked up at me, and for just a second, just one brief moment, I saw recognition in her eyes. I saw the seed of something cracking open inside her, the beginning of understanding that maybe this wasn't normal, wasn't okay, wasn't what love was supposed to look like. I stood up, gathered my folder, and walked out. My hands were shaking, but my steps were steady. 2 days after that confrontation, he sent me a long text message. It was perfectly crafted, a masterpiece of manipulation. He apologized for losing his temper during our conversation. He said he understood my concern and he respected my love for my daughter. He talked about how much he valued family, how he was committed to being a better husband, how he was even considering therapy to work on his stress management. He ended by saying he hoped we could move forward together for the sake of my grandson. who needed his grandmother in his life. It was everything I might have wanted to hear. And it was completely, utterly fake. I could feel the calculation behind every word, the way he was trying to manipulate me back into silence, back into complicity. But the real twist came later that same day, when my daughter called me. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her at first. "He told everyone," she sobbed. "He told his family, he told the neighbors, he's been posting on social media. He's telling everyone that you're trying to manipulate me, that you're after money, that you've always been jealous of our life, that you're making up lies because you can't stand that I'm happy." My stomach dropped. "What money? I don't have any money." "He's telling people you want access to our assets, to our investment accounts and our savings. He's saying you've been pressuring me to get money from him, that you're trying to destroy our marriage so you can control me and get financial support. Mom, his family is calling me. His mother called me a liar. She said I'm letting you poison my mind. People are commenting on his posts, saying horrible things about you." The cruelty of it took my breath away. He was creating a narrative where I was the villain, where he was the victim of a vindictive mother-in-law. He was isolating her even further, turning everyone in their social circle against both of us. For a moment, I felt the old fear rising up. The fear of being alone, of being seen as the problem, of losing my daughter to his version of reality. But then I thought about Maria at the community center. I thought about Mrs. Patterson saying, "Don't let her go under." I thought about my grandson whispering, "Daddy yells a lot," and I said 4 words that surprised even myself. "Come home with me." Silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, could hear the wheels turning in her mind. "What?" my daughter whispered. "Come home with me. You and the baby. Right now. Pack a bag and come home. I can't. I can't just leave. Where would I go? What would I do? He's right, I don't have anything. I haven't worked in 3 years. I don't have money of my own. I don't have any way to support myself. You have me," I said, and my voice cracked on the words because they were so true and so important. "You have always had me, and that has to be enough." She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. That hesitation, that tiny pause before she said she had to go, that was the proof I needed that something inside her was finally waking up. 1 month later, on a Tuesday afternoon while he was at work, my daughter left. She didn't leave in one dramatic moment with bags packed and doors slamming. She left slowly, carefully, the way someone escapes from a trap. A bag of clothes taken to her car one morning when she said she was going to the dry cleaner. Important documents photographed and emailed to herself. Her grandmother's jewelry, which she had inherited, quietly removed from the safe and hidden at a friend's house. And then one day, while he was in the city meeting with clients about some major stock market investments that he claimed would set them up for life, she packed up her son, drove to my apartment, and said, "I'm ready." They've been living in my spare bedroom for 7 months now. The room that used to hold my sewing machine and boxes of old clothes and memories now holds a small bed for my daughter and a crib for my grandson. It's cramped. It's not ideal. The apartment that used to feel too big for just me now feels too small for 3 people, and all our stuff and all our complicated feelings. But it's safe. My daughter attends counseling twice a week at the community center. She started a support group for survivors of domestic violence. She's enrolled in online classes to finish her degree, the one she left incomplete when she got married. She's applying for jobs, slowly building back her confidence that she can stand on her own 2 feet. And slowly, so slowly, I'm watching her come back to herself. Last week, she wore the yellow sweater she used to love, the one I hadn't seen in years. She put it on in the morning and caught me staring. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. You look beautiful. You look like yourself." She smiled then, a real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes. "I feel like myself," she said. For the first time in years, I feel like me. We drink coffee together every morning now, fresh and hot, exactly how we like it. We take turns making breakfast. We watch my grandson play with his toys on the living room floor. We talk about everything and nothing, making up for all the years of silence and evasion and careful conversation designed to avoid the truth. Sometimes she cries. Sometimes she's angry at herself for staying so long, for letting it get so bad, for not seeing the warning signs sooner. Sometimes she's angry at me for not saying something sooner, for tiptoeing around the problem instead of confronting it head on. And I let her be angry, because she has every right to be. He's contested the divorce, of course. He's fighting for custody, claiming she's unstable, that I've manipulated her, that she's an unfit mother. The legal battle has been expensive and exhausting and painful. But she's not backing down. She has a lawyer now, one who specializes in domestic violence cases, and she's documenting everything. The bruises she photographed secretly and sent to herself in emails. The text messages where he threatened her. The recordings she made on her phone of his rages. The truth is coming out, slowly but surely. And my daughter is standing in that truth instead of hiding from it. For me, watching her rebuild her life feels like witnessing a resurrection. The daughter I thought I had lost is coming back, piece by piece. She laughs now, full-bodied laughs that fill the apartment with sound. She plays with her son without constantly looking over her shoulder. She makes plans for the future, talks about the career she wants to build, the life she wants to create. And I feel reborn too, because for so many years I felt helpless, watching her suffer and not knowing how to help. I blamed myself for not seeing it sooner, for not being braver, for not dragging her out of that situation by force if necessary. But Maria at the community center helped me understand that it doesn't work that way, that you can't force someone to leave before they're ready, that the best thing I could do was exactly what I did, make it clear that I was there, that I believed her, that I would never abandon her no matter what she decided. It's been 7 months now since that Tuesday, when she showed up at my door ready to start over. 7 months of slow healing, of small victories, of setbacks and breakthroughs. 7 months of learning how to be a family again, how to trust again, how to believe that the future could be different from the past. My apartment in Queens feels different now, warmer somehow, despite being more crowded. The winter sun streams through the kitchen window in the mornings and lands on our breakfast table, illuminating the three of us as we eat and plan our days. My grandson chatters away about preschool and his friends and the picture he drew that's hanging on the refrigerator. My daughter makes lists of things she needs to do, places she needs to call, steps she needs to take. And I sit there with my coffee watching them, feeling a peace I hadn't known I was missing. I look back now at those years of suffering, at all the silent meals and canceled plans and unexplained bruises, and I don't feel bitter. I feel grateful that I found the strength to act before I lost her completely. Grateful that the slap I heard that morning behind the door was the catalyst that finally pushed me to stop being silent. Grateful that my daughter is strong enough to leave, brave enough to start over, resilient enough to believe in herself again. Those years of watching her suffer no longer chain me to regret. They shaped me into a woman strong enough to save her daughter, fierce enough to stand up to manipulation and lies, brave enough to risk everything for the truth. And they shaped my daughter too, in ways we're still discovering. She's not the same person she was before all this. Neither am I. We're both scarred, both wounded, both carrying trauma that will take years to fully heal. But we're also stronger. We're also wiser. We're also more committed to never again accepting love that looks like control, affection that comes with conditions, family that requires us to make ourselves small. Every night now, when I tuck my grandson into his crib, I whisper a promise to him that I know my daughter can hear from her bed across the room. This cycle ends with us. I promise him that he will grow up knowing what real love looks like, that he will see his mother be respected and valued and treated as an equal, that he will learn from watching us that it's never too late to choose yourself, to demand better, to walk away from anything that makes you less than you are. If you're listening to this and something feels painfully familiar, if you recognize yourself or someone you love in this story, please don't ignore it. Please don't wait until the situation becomes unbearable. Please don't tell yourself that it's not that bad, that you're overreacting, that things will get better on their own. They won't. Abuse doesn't cure itself. Love doesn't hurt this way. Have you ever lived or known someone who lived something like this? Have you watched someone you love disappear into a relationship that was slowly destroying them? Have you stayed silent when you should have spoken, or spoken up and been told you were interfering, or felt helpless to save someone who wouldn't admit they needed saving? If my story touched you, if it resonated with something in your own life, please share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in this, knowing that others have walked this path and survived, is the thing that gives us courage to take that first step toward freedom. And if you found value in hearing this story, if it moved you or made you think or helped you understand something you were struggling with, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. It helps me keep sharing these stories with people who need them most, helps me reach others who might be sitting alone somewhere, wondering if they're crazy for feeling the way they feel, if they're wrong for wanting more than this, if they're being ungrateful for not accepting the crumbs of affection they're offered. You're not crazy. You're not wrong. You're not ungrateful. You deserve to be loved in a way that makes you feel safe, valued, and free. And it's never too late to choose that for yourself, no matter how long you've been accepting less. I've learned that strength isn't about never being broken. It's about finding the courage to pick up the pieces and rebuild. It's about recognizing that the cracks where light gets in are not signs of weakness, but evidence of survival. My daughter and I, we are both works in progress, both learning day by day what it means to reclaim ourselves from the shadows of someone else's control. And every small victory, every morning we wake up without fear, every moment we choose ourselves over the comfort of familiar pain, is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. This is our story, but it doesn't have to be yours forever. There is always a door, always a way out, always someone waiting to help you walk through it into the light.